Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here for another weekly episode of Biblical Characters Decoded. Today we shall speak about Korach, the rebel. This program is dedicated by Leon Sutton in celebration of Karen and Leon's anniversary on the 29th of Sivan. Rebellion is one of my favorite topics. I don't know about you. There's something about it that is adventurous, spontaneous, exciting. But we also know that rebellion can create plenty of problems. So I'm not being naive about it. But if you had to choose, if you have a rebellious child, or you have a very passive child. So passive is definitely going to be less troublesome, less disruptive, less upheavals. But there may be also a lack of that zest, a lack of vigor, a lack of energy. What we want to know is that we are not just going to be conformists that just follow a path of the herd mentality, but that we have a rebellious energy within us that wants to disrupt the status quo for the good and make things better. And that's where rebellion comes in and is at its best. But rebellion has to be harnessed, because if used the wrong way, it can create also tremendous damage, tremendous destruction, as we've seen throughout history. So that's what we want to talk about here. Now, who's the character that we're looking at? The character's name is Korach. He's perhaps a lesser-known biblical person in the narrative of the Bible, but he's yet a significant one with tremendous lessons for us in our personal lives. So this is based on the series we began several months ago, actually at the request of many of you, which was to take the best-selling book of history called the Bible, look at its characters, and see what we can learn from them, timeless and timely lessons. Being that this is a book that goes back thousands of years, and as I said, the biggest bestseller, there are unbelievable messages and lessons we can learn from every character, both the positive ones and the negative ones. So here's how the story goes. In the Bible, we're told that there was a man called Korach. He was actually a relative to Moses, the great leader Moses. And he was a Levite. He came from the same tribe, the Levites. But Korach rises and comes with his cohorts, and they mutineer. They challenge Moses and Moses' very essence of his leadership. And the statement they make is a very simple one. It's actually very contemporary if you think about it. They say, all the people of the community are holy. So why did you lift yourself up? Did you raise yourself to be a higher rung of the ladder of hierarchy? Why is there a hierarchy altogether? We're all holy in the eyes of God. We're all children of God. Now, I don't know whether Karl Marx knew about the story of Korach, but it's essentially the question of social structures. Why shouldn't everybody be treated equally? Why should some people be considered the leaders of others? That's what Korach's argument was. And there's an elaborate story how he challenged Moses, and Moses humbly fell to the ground and asked God what to do. And ultimately, it was God that showed the way, that Moses and Aaron, his brother, who was the high priest, were actually chosen to be the leaders. And it wasn't a matter of a power move, of a power struggle where Moses was able to outmaneuver others and became a leader, but this was part of the divine structure. But the question is a very good one. And what is the answer to Korach's argument? All men are created equal is what our Declaration of Independence says. And it's based essentially on the principles of the Bible that says that all human beings are created in the divine image. All, without exception. Whether a person is going to grow up to be a teacher, an educator, another person a recipient, each one with their own strengths, doesn't take away from the divine image in which each of us is created, which essentially turns us into indispensable entities. That you and I and every one of the 8 billion people on this planet have something unique and indispensable to contribute. So why are there leaders? Now, we understand in government and politics and other sectors of society, leadership is necessary. Just like you can't have many captains of a ship. You need one captain who's trained and knows how to steer the ship in the right direction. And the same thing in any entity, in a corporation. in a project. So no one, that's not the question here. The question is, what he says, they're all holy. Why are you holier than the rest? The fact that you may be more competent as a leader is more of a technical matter. But here's the key answer. And this is where we'll also be able to look at how we can take a rebellion and look at the positives and the negatives and then harness it for the positive. We'll get to that shortly. The answer is that it's not just a matter of a teacher or an educator or someone who's more competent. The fact is, the way human beings are created, we need to be taught. You can't expect a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old to be in the same quality level as someone who's a 20-year-old or a 30 or 40-year-old. So this isn't just a matter of a technicality, and it doesn't make the teacher holier, but it means there has to be a fundamental respect of the structures of existence. So while it's fine to ask the question, isn't everybody equal and equally sacred? Everyone is created in the divine image. All people are created equal. Yet at the same time, what Korach's mistake was that he tried to eliminate barriers altogether. Let everybody learn on their own. Let's all figure it out. But then you'll have anarchy. Then you will not have guidance and direction. The goal of a good educator and teacher is not mind control. And it's not power and influence. It's not to teach people what to think. It's to teach them how to think. And for this, we do need guidance. Children need parents. Students need teachers. Freshmen or newcomers, novices need experts. And this is a quality. This is not meant to replace or say, oh, that person is greater than I am, and then I am, but rather it's respecting the hierarchy. In spiritual terms, it means the following, that though every piece of the puzzle is equal in the sense that equally valuable, but that doesn't mean that there is no hierarchy. That doesn't mean there isn't a structure. Existence is defined by structure. However, it's not trapped by structure. So it's respecting the structure, just like when you play music. There's a structure to music. Musical notes, how you play them, but then you create something that transcends structure. So to ignore structure and make believe like it doesn't exist is simply just as bad as completely being trapped by it. So here's where the rebellion comes in a positive way and in a negative way. Korach was correct by challenging the status quo and actually eliciting this concept that everybody has a certain fundamental equality. Let us not worship our leaders. Let us not create cult personalities. Remember, there's only one God. Remember that we all have a certain equality. But his mistake in his rebellion was that he took it too far. And he himself, it got to his head. Because he claimed, I want to be a leader. So it wasn't like he was saying everyone's equal. He was saying everyone's equal, but let me be the leader. Why you? And in many ways, he projected his own sense of self. We're saying, since he knew that he wants to rise to leadership, so he felt Moses was the same. He had a good, healthy ego, and he wanted to rise to leadership, but didn't realize that leadership is based on humility, not based on because you're superior. And that process, you actually do have something to teach others. You become that role model. We spoke about that last week, what the true leader is. So let's define it now in personal terms. I remember once a friend of mine, a European, someone from Belgium, from Brussels, was sharing with me the following episode. He said that when he was a student in school, he went to some of the private schools in Paris and some other European countries. So they were in a private school, a very prestigious school where they were educated. And one day, word got out that a new student is coming. But this new student was notoriously known in the European inner circles. He was thrown out of every private school in Europe because he was very rebellious, very challenging, and wouldn't conform. He wouldn't follow guidelines. So though he came from a very wealthy family, but these schools are built on discipline. So the day comes, I think it was in Paris, he arrives in class, and he was in this guy's class. Richard is the friend of mine that told me this story. So Richard tells me we're sitting in class, and we're looking at this newcomer and waiting for some trouble. But he's quiet. He's sitting through the entire period, quiet. At the end of the class, right before the bell's about to ring, like a minute, 2 minutes before, he raises his hand, the troublemaker, so to speak. And he says to the teacher, I've been listening and watching you teach, And you have some good things to say, but you're not a good teacher at all. But there's some good news. If you come to my house tonight, this student tells the teacher, I'll be happy to give you some lessons of how to become a better teacher. So you could imagine this teacher picked him up and he threw him out of the school. They expelled him immediately just for the chutzpah, for the nerve of speaking that way. And they never saw him again. Richard said that was the only time I ever met him. But I remember his name. So recently, we're talking now 30 years later, he said, let me look this guy up. I want to know what's the story with this young man. What happened to him? See, now he'd probably be in his 40s or 50s. He says either he became a criminal or some real troublemaker, or he's probably a great leader. And he looks him up. I remember he told me his name. I don't remember right now. And he discovers, yes, he searches him on Google. And he discovers he's the director of strategic news initiatives at the New York Public Library. And when you look in his bio, what does he say? That he's a disruptor. He's able to look at any given situation and look at it with a fresh set of eyes. So indeed, exactly what he did in school, which was, of course, disrespectful, troubling, and the school couldn't deal with it, he actually became and turned it into a career, where he's able to look at a situation, and most people just see what it is, and maybe if there's a problem, they may troubleshoot. But he was always able to look at things, and he indeed turned around and created all kinds of interesting initiatives at the New York Library on Fifth Avenue. So you see from this that we all have within us a fire. I have a chapter in my book, Youth. The chapter's called Youth. It's in the book, Toward a Meaningful Life. It actually was an inspiration to Matisyahu, the rap singer. And he remembers sitting with me. He wanted to review the chapter in the book. It talks about this, the fire in a young person's belly. Where adults may feel this young person is rebellious, is disruptive, breaking rules, not following guidelines and orders. So maybe best you tolerate it, but others, no. We have to crush that rebellious spirit. He has to learn to be a team player. He has to learn to fit in. The truth is, as I discussed in that chapter, that's a fight. That's not coming from a negative place. A young person is growing into an adult, has a fire. The soul is made of fire. And fire wants to change things. It's a frustration, an inner frustration of a rebel without a cause, looking to change the world, but is frustrated and doesn't know how to change the status quo. So could definitely be going the wrong direction, like fire. What happens with fire when it's not properly controlled? It can be very destructive. But the real goal is not to extinguish the fire. It's to harness it. That those adults that are more seasoned and more experienced should teach that young man or woman to take that energy, to take that rebellious spirit and direct it toward a spiritual revolution. So we have many people who look to crush, who look to extinguish, who look to some way compromise or in other ways limit that disruptive, rebellious energy within us. But a soul by definition is rebellious. It doesn't accept the status quo. It wants to make the world a better place. Going the wrong direction, yes, it can be destructive. Korach took it the wrong way. That's why the story is documented. If he was such a troublemaker, why do we even have to know about it? And he was punished at the end. Because the essential idea of challenging is healthy. It just has to come with humility and has to be directed in the proper fashion. And that's where real change happens. But sadly, most of us do become conformists in life. What's the expression they say? You are born an original, don't become a copy. But we become copies, either just through the expectations and demands of our parents, our educators, our societies. You know, how many parents project their interests and their goals on their children? And even the children don't really fit in. You force them to fit in. And then what we do as young people, remember, look at a young soul, a young child. Explorers, is always disrupting, is always looking at a certain sense of adventure, of free abandon. But when the child keeps being criticized and not validated, we stop. We slowly slow down. And that free spirit within us becomes weaker and weaker to the point we bury it. And we start becoming a pleaser, a goody-goody, I'll do exactly what I'm told. Now, the opposite of that spirit is not, that spirit doesn't mean destruction. The only way to, in other words, the only way to deal with it is by suppressing it. No, it's harnessing it. Just like when you see a young person has a lot of energy, whether it's in sports or in arts or in music or in any given area, what you want is to direct it, never to suppress. It's the worst thing possible to suppress energy within us, to try to bottle it up. Besides the frustration it creates, it really creates damage. It creates damage. It's like trying to stop the energy of a person who wants to express himself, and no, let's suppress it, let's limit it. You want to harness it. So rebellion, my friends, is actually an important tool. When we say that a human being is like, they say the soul of a human being is the flame of God. A flame, a fire. Fires are raging, they're powerful. Without it, we can't live. But we want to direct it. We want to harness it. We want it like a laser beam. And then you can change worlds. So it's a question of creating that balance between the two. I often mention that tragic poem by Oliver Wendell Holmes, The Voiceless. Alas to those that die with their music or their song still inside them. Alas to those that die with their song still inside them. Excuse me. We all have a song within us, a melody, unique song. And very often it gets suppressed, it gets silenced. Either it's disapproved by some people who don't like it because their own insecurities, and they want to impose their interests on us. Society is doing that all the time. Even though everyone likes to think I'm an original, I think out of the box. Yes, but society in its own silent way, or sometimes not so silent, will punish someone who goes off the reservation too far. But it's really those that have that spirit within them that change the world. Steve Jobs, and not necessarily was a model in all positive ways, but he did have one powerful message among many. But the one that he said, only those that are crazy that are crazy enough to believe they can change the world are the ones that do. So we have a craziness, we have a spirit that really just challenges the status quo, does challenge the givens, the norms. And that's where real things happen. Don't suppress it. Don't silence it. Take that rebel within you and direct it. Learn from those that before you. Consult. Have a mentor. Do it with humility, but do it. Don't allow yourself to silence and quiet down